Hello and welcome. I'm going to talk today a little bit about how I decided to go to therapy, just because, funnily enough, it was not a thing that I thought that I needed, and it took me a while. I don't think I started therapy until like 4 years ago, and I've been out of the cult for 12. So it was definitely not something that I thought that I needed, and it's just something that I didn't do. So I want to talk about kind of my personal barriers to it and what finally pulled the trigger for me as far as deciding that, okay, maybe this would be something that would be helpful. Because I always thought of therapy as like, it's crap. It's like if you have no friends and nobody will listen to you and nobody will help you, then you have to pay somebody to listen to your problems. And that's what therapy is. And of course, in cult literature, any sort of self confidence or self building is mocked and made fun of. So it was like the cult leader would mock people in therapy. He would be like, "Oh, all these women who like make up problems and decide that they have something wrong with them because they're lonely and they need a friend." So that was my idea of therapy. It was something that weak people did. And I was not weak, therefore I did not need therapy. And that was something that I stuck with for a while. And the moment in my life where I decided I needed therapy was the moment in my life where I had also decided to get a divorce. And it was the first time in my life that I was making a decision for myself, by myself, and with, I was the only one who had the information surrounding the subject. And when I decided to leave the cult, I didn't decide to leave the cult. I decided to stay with the man that I loved. And I think that's important because people think that I made a decision and escaped the cult, and I didn't. I didn't give it any thought because I didn't know how to think. I knew that I didn't know how to think. So when the guy that I was with, who later became my husband, when he said he wanted to leave and he had thought about it, and these were his reasons why, I trusted that. And I thought, okay, the only decision that I need to make is, am I going to go with him or not? And I made the decision to go with him, which one of the best decisions in my life. But it was not the decision to leave a cult. It was a decision to go with a man that I loved, which was an easy decision. And then the decision to get divorced was a terrible decision. It was not one that I came to lightly. It was one that I second guessed a lot. I was never the person who threatened divorce. I thought that when you get married, you stay married. And I had tried to make myself um, as serviceable as possible, and I tried to need nothing from this person. I thought, okay, if I don't need my husband to be my friend, I don't need my husband to be my partner, I don't need my husband to be the provider, I don't need my husband, like, and I just took all these things away and thought, well, let me not need an equal partnership, let me not need to be seen or heard in my marriage. And, I was like, this will fix it. It did not. So I finally got to this point in my marriage where I really thought about, okay, I'm on this journey and towards this path of saving myself, and I'm starting to find out about the things that make me feel alive. And I'm finally, for the first time in my life, I think that I'm important. And I think that my life should be given space to be lived. And I realized that that was in direct contrast to the marriage that I was in. And I would either need to pick to save my marriage, or I would need to pick to save myself. And those were my options. There was no way to meld them together. If I wanted to save the marriage, I would have to stop personal growth. And if I wanted to save my personal growth, I would have to let go of my marriage. And it was a very terrible time for me. I felt very, very alone because I couldn't reach out to anybody because I had grown up in a cult. I didn't know anybody. And I also didn't feel comfortable reaching out to people. I tried reaching out to one woman, and she was part of my husband's group of friends because we had very different group of friends. And she was well meaning, and so she was like, let's get together, let's have a girls night, let's talk about like how we can like get you guys back together. And like, I loved this person and I wanted it to work. But one of the main drivers of kind of a wedge in our marriage is that he was very Christian and I was in the middle of losing my faith. And so when I met with this woman who was part of his friends from his church group, I very lightly. Like, I didn't even go into all the issues with my marriage. I was like, well, we have like tough communication problems, and it's difficult for me to communicate, and it's difficult for us to this. And she was like, I'm going to stop you right there. Let me tell you what the problem is that you don't love Jesus enough and you don't understand what your place is in the marriage. And I was like, yeah, that's correct. That is the problem. And because I don't see that changing, I have to let this go. So we understood that the marriage was like collapsing, and it was my doing, and therefore I thought it was my fault. And I thought that I had to bear the brunt of the guilt, and there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't happy with this man, because he was a good man, and I still hold to that. I still speak to him. I still believe that he's a very, very good man. But we should not have been married past the point that we were. I think the marriage was coming to a very natural ending point, and I'm really thankful that it lasted as long as it did. And I think it was a successful marriage, being what it was. And I'm really thankful that it happened. And if I could choose to do it again, I would still choose to go through the marriage and through the divorce. But it was at that time of trying to leave this marriage that I had a moment where I sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, okay, what are the facts? Like, what is the truth? What is actually happening here? And I was like, what is actually happening is that I understand at this point in my life that I grew up in a cult, and it was very detrimental to me. And there are things that are still lingering, that are patterns that need to be undone. And I also acknowledge that I'm going through a divorce, which is a very painful process. So I was at this lovely crossroads, which allowed me to feel incapable enough to be like, you know what? I need help. Um, and at that point, I was like, okay, let me find a therapist. And in my head, I was like, I need the therapist to help me navigate the divorce, because divorce is a new thing for me. And I just want to make sure that I'm asking the right questions. I don't want to leave this person and throw away something that has been, up until a certain point, very beneficial. And I'm willing to be wrong. So I wanted to go to the therapist and just make sure that I wasn't looking at the wrong things and trying to find evidence where there was none. So I started seeing a therapist at the time that I started getting divorced. And I remember walking in, and I had chosen a woman because I did not feel safe with men. And I was like, I want therapy to be a safe place. So I got a really good recommendation for this wonderful woman in Austin. That was such a good decision. And I saw her for about a year before I left Austin. And she was an incredible help to me. And I take that with me, and I'd like to offer that to you, of just that therapy is not for weak people. Therapy makes you stronger. So if you're at this moment in your life with this whole coronavirus thing where you feel overwhelmed, I think it's a good point, when life puts you in a space that you're willing to ask for help. I think it's important to listen to that and be like, okay, let me ask for help, but let me ask the right people for help. Because I didn't reach out to friends, I didn't reach out to um, people who would have an opinion. I reached out to a mental health professional that wanted my best interest, which is my own mental health. And she helped to guide me towards the things that made me stronger. So if you're in this moment um, where you find yourself willing to ask for help, I encourage you to reach out and ask for it. And I know that a lot of places right now are offering therapy sessions online, which is incredible. So I just wanted to throw that out there, of what motivated me to ask for help for therapy. And it was at being at this place in my life where I was finally willing to acknowledge that I needed help, because I wanted to be this really strong person. And again, therapy doesn't make you weak, therapy makes you stronger. So I want to offer that to y'all. Um, and later on, I'll talk about um, what it was like to transition from therapy to not be in therapy anymore, and then to go back to therapy. And it's always a whole journey. But in any case, again, if you're at that spot, reach out, ask for help, ask the right people, ask the professionals, and let this moment of feeling vulnerable turn into something that makes you stronger. So hopefully that helps. Otherwise, thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.